All right, I'm going to open up the webinar now.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give folks just a couple more minutes to join today's webinar, and then we'll get started. All right, we have a very full agenda today, so I will go ahead and get things started. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Megan Meadows, and I serve as the Director of the Division of Energy Assistance within the Office of Community Services and the Administration for Children and Families. The Division of Energy Assistance, for those of you who don't know, administers the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP, and the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program, or LIHWAP. On behalf of OCS, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on utilizing community solar for LIHEAP income qualified households. Before we begin today's discussion, I do want to take a moment and highlight this week's announcement on Tuesday. We were able to release nearly $3.7 billion for federal fiscal year 24 LIHEAP funds. I recognize how important having these resources available to begin your heating program is, and I'm very grateful for this team for all the work they did to make this release happen. So thank you. Next slide, we'll go over today's agenda. First, we'll receive an overview from the Department of Energy for their connector tool. We're also going to receive today an update on various projects from the National Association for State Energy Officials and the National Energy Assistance Directors Association. Then we'll hear firsthand from 3 states who are all at various stages of implementation of their community solar projects. These states include the state of Illinois, District of Columbia, and Minnesota. And we'll have an opportunity for question and answer at the end of today's discussion. So please feel free to utilize the Q&A feature in the webinar. The next slide, I will allow each presenter to introduce themselves and their roles. And I will also note that these slides will be available after today's webinar. But we're really excited to have an extensive group of folks presenting today with a great experience throughout the field in both low-income sector and also in implementing community solar projects. Next slide. So before we hear from our presenters, I want to take a moment and highlight recent guidance published by our office here at OCS. We've been receiving questions from grant recipients about how LIHEAP can be utilized for community solar projects. And so we wanted to develop some guidance for folks to begin thinking about how to utilize LIHEAP funds on top of the other resources that are available. Since LIHEAP is a Brock grant, it's really important to understand and recognize that there are opportunities for states to design programs and utilize funding in a variety of ways, all within those statutory requirements. OCS recognizes that community solar can be a resource to assist LIHEAP households reduce their overall energy costs and can help grant recipients achieve LIHEAP's core mission of meeting immediate home energy needs and reducing energy burden. The guidance that was issued this past June outlines areas where LIHEAP funds can be utilized, and more importantly, where it cannot be utilized because it might violate the statute. We've also outlined things to consider during your project development, such as the ever important community consumer protection progress. If you have additional specific questions on how to incorporate LIHEAP funding in a community solar project, please feel free to reach out to us at OCS. We're here to help as you develop these projects and think about how you can utilize your funding. With that, I won't take up any more time. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our federal partner at the Department of Energy to give an update of where they are at in their connector tool. Ariel?
Awesome. Thank you, Megan, and thank you to HHS for inviting me to speak today about community solar. I'm excited to kick us off, and we have a great panel of folks who will be speaking today. So if we go to the next slide, I will briefly introduce myself. My name is Ariel Drehobel. I work in the Solar Energy Technologies Office at the U.S. Department of Energy, supporting workforce and equitable access. So I'm on the team that's looking to make sure that solar energy is accessible and beneficial for all households across the country. Moving to the next slide. You can also go forward until the few bullets are all there. There should be 3 of them. Thank you. So I wanted to start us off with just a brief definition of what community solar is, which is what we're going to be talking about on this webinar today. So at the U.S. Department of Energy, we define community solar as any solar project or purchasing program that provides benefits to multiple customers or off-takers. And I think the main points that are important to point out are that community solar can be a great way for households who aren't able to access the benefits of rooftop solar. They can still access the benefits of solar energy generation. These could be barriers such as, being a renter or not having upfront capital to install solar on your home yourself. Community solar is a way to access that lower cost of energy generation that we often see from solar energy and help make sure that all households can have access to these benefits. Typically, community solar works by providing an electric bill credit for the energy that's generated from the solar panels at the community solar farm onto a bill, and generally that leads to a lower bill. And at the Department of Energy, I just want to highlight that we are really focused on ensuring that community solar leads to meaningful benefits for households who participate. So we're working to make sure that low-income households can have access to community solar subscriptions, that they lead to deep and meaningful bill savings, help us build a more resilient grid, create opportunities for community wealth building as well as workforce opportunities. And we have a number of programs that are aiming to accomplish this. And we'll hear from some of the other speakers today and state partners about how their programs are working towards these goals. On the next slide, it's just a brief overview of the program that I work on at the Department of Energy called the National Community Solar Partnership, which is aiming to make sure these meaningful benefits are incorporated into community solar across the country. So just at a very high level, and on my last slide, I have a little link of how you can sign up to get more information. But we have a number of different programs, including a technical assistance program that provides free assistance to any stakeholder who's interested in learning or expanding community solar. We work directly with states. We have our Community Power Accelerator that helps small community solar developers get access to gap financing and training to be able to develop community solar. We have our Clean Energy Connector project, which I'm going to talk more about shortly, as well as other initiatives to really work towards making sure community solar is accessible for all households. Moving to the next slide. The next few slides are just providing a quick overview of this project that we've been working on in partnership with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for over a year and a half now. The Low-Income Clean Energy Connector came out of stakeholder engagement that our program did back in 2021, where we identified that low-income access to community solar subscriptions had many barriers in place, and that a role that the federal government could play would be to create a process to help streamline that enrollment and ensure that low-income households enrolling in community solar subscriptions were able to access verified, deep, meaningful bill savings and strong consumer protections. So since last year, we've been partnering with the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as a number of other partners on this slide here, some of whom are on this call as well, on developing this online tool that's going to help states be able to make those streamlined connections for households and make it easier for them to enroll in community solar and gain those lower bills and those savings from their subscription. Moving to the next slide. So as I said, we kicked off this project last year, and right now we are currently working with 6 states. Our 3 pilot states are Illinois, New Mexico, and the District of Columbia. We've also been working with New York, New Jersey, and Colorado as we build out this project. I want to pause and say thank you to all of the states and the other partners on the other side who we've been working with so far. At this point, we have developed the software and we're getting ready to beta test and roll out within these states, ideally early next year. And ultimately, we want this to be a software that any state could opt into using, as long as the state has a low-income community solar program in place that has those consumer protections that we're looking for, many of which are laid out within the HHS memo that was shown earlier. Moving on to the next slide. This slide is just a brief overview of how this software is going to work and who would be using it. So the intention for the Low-Income Clean Energy Connector is to create an easy pathway for low-income households to enroll in community solar subscriptions with those consumer protections verified savings. The connector would not be directly interfacing with households, but instead is a way for local LIHEAP administrators to be able to connect households with subscription managers who are looking to enroll households in community solar programs. So we're planning to have 4 different users per state. The first 2 being the state community solar program administrator and the state LIHEAP program administrator. They would be able to be approving who else within the state would have accounts or access on the connector, creating program evaluations and verifications, and making sure that everything is prioritized and households are connected in a just and equitable way based on the state's priorities. Then on the other side, the subscription managers who help to enroll households in community solar subscriptions would be able to upload their projects that would get verified by the state that have available subscriptions. And then the low-income LIHEAP administrators, the local LIHEAP administrators, would be able to identify households that are interested in community solar who have been income verified, upload them securely into the connector, and then they would be automatically connected with one of those subscription managers to enroll in community solar. Moving to the next slide, just a few key points that I want to flag about the project. I'm happy to answer questions at the end. We are including a compensation method in this project so that subscription managers would be able to compensate local LIHEAP administrators for the work they'd be doing to educate households on community solar and enroll them through the connector tool. We are also working through our pilot states. We have fellows in place, some of which are on the call today, and we'll be speaking more about the work they're doing in their states. But they're helping to support a lot of creation of education materials and the things that local LIHEAP administrators may need to help educate and enroll folks in community solar, as well as creating a guidebook to help states be prepared to sign on to use this software in the future. We're also building out strong consumer protections, working with the National Consumer Law Center on that. We'll have more guidance and a report out on that soon. And also aiming to make sure that states have strong relationships between their community solar programs and LIHEAP offices and strong partnerships there to make sure that these programs can be well integrated and benefit households to the most that they possibly can. And with that, I just have one final slide sharing a couple next steps for the project, a few reports coming out, software launch, and if you're interested in joining the National Community Solar Partnership, you can use this URL code here. I'll also drop a link in the chat. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to some of my colleagues, Cass Lovejoy and Grace Lowe with NIHEAP and NASIO for some remarks. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ariel. Hi, I'm Cassandra Lovejoy. I'm Policy Director at the National Energy Assistance Directors Association, which represents state LIHEAP directors. So NIHEAP is really excited to be a part of this webinar. We understand that the importance of making sure that new energy technologies, including solar, are accessible and affordable for LIHEAP customers. We support a deliberate and practical approach to developing low-income solar in a way that ensures the customer will be better off after being enrolled in any kind of community solar or renewable program. And so we're really excited to be involved in 2 projects that are focused on developing community solar solutions that are tailored to the needs of state LIHEAP offices and their customers. The first project is the connector tool that Ariel just finished talking about. And the second one is the ISSI, the Integrated Shared Solar Initiative, which you'll hear about in just a second from Grace over at the National Association of State Energy Officials, or NASIO. In general, we hope that NIHEAP can continue to be a resource for state LIHEAP offices as you continue to develop and refine your renewable energy components of your programs. And we also hope that you reach out to us with any obstacles that you're facing or concerns that you have about either solar, community solar, or renewables in your states. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Grace to hear a little bit more about what NASIO is up to.
Great. Thanks, Cass. And if you could move to the next slide, that'd be great. You heard from Ariel about the connector tool project, which NASIO and NIHEAP are supporting. So I wanted to provide a little more context on the Inclusive Shared Solar Initiative that NASIO and NIHEAP are helping facilitate with support from DOE. And this is really an initiative to bring together state energy offices and state LIHEAP offices in order to provide broader and more equitable access to community solar. And so we really want to help states harness some of the unique expertise and roles and networks of each of these state agencies to really scale community solar and ensure that it's not a premium program that only some households can access. So just a little background on state energy offices. If you're not familiar, again, NASIO represents all 56 state and territory governor designated energy offices. And broadly, state energy offices are involved in energy planning, program design, stakeholder engagement, and policy across a number of different energy topics and issues, including community solar. And within this space, state energy offices are often involved in advising or engaging governors, legislators, regulators on policies such as low-income carve-outs or incentives to help spur more low-income community solar. They also develop programs and implement incentive programs for community solar, and just generally convene a wide array of stakeholders from utilities and co-ops to project developers, to community groups. And so in partnership with state LIHEAP offices, those offices play an equally important role in sort of ensuring that the low-income households that receive access to the benefits of community solar are served, and that their benefits are received. And so really informing policy and developing programs that align with state LIHEAP office goals and priorities, helping streamline income qualification processes so that households don't have to repeatedly prove that they are income qualified to receive these clean energy benefits, and then just elevating the needs of low-income communities. So making sure that those concerns are heard, and that throughout the program design and implementation, that states are addressing energy burden and making sure there are consumer protections in place as programs and incentives are being rolled out. And so together, these agencies can collaborate to help improve access And through ISSI, we are doing this with a few pilot states. So you'll hear from 2 of them later on in this webinar, but we're working with both the state energy offices and the state LIHEAP offices in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the District of Columbia. And they are piloting some really exciting approaches to help reach more low-income households. So I think now I will turn it over to Jennifer Schmidt with Illinois.
Thank you, Grace. And just want to thank the Department of Health and Human Services and the Division of Energy Assistance for inviting us to talk. My name is Jennifer Schmidt. I'm the Senior Program Manager of Illinois Solar for All with the Illinois Power Agency. It's really exciting for me to get to talk to you all today because before this job, I worked for 13 years in the LIHEAP program that serves Chicago and Cook County. So I'm a firm believer in seeing how we can coordinate and get solar programs to work with LIHEAP programs and serve the common customers that we're trying to serve. So I'm going to turn it over to our ORISE fellow that's serving in Illinois, Adrienne Cluis, and she's going to start us off on our slides.
Hi everyone, my name is Adrienne Cluis. I'm the ORISE Fellow at the Illinois Power Agency, and I'll be going through ILSA with you guys. Can go to the next slide. So the Illinois Solar for All program was created as part of the 2016 Future Energy Jobs Act and expanded later by CEJA. ILSA targets low-income and environmental justice communities, aiming to promote equitable access to the solar economy through program incentives that make solar more affordable across the state. So while CEJA created ILSA and gave us the foundation to start, CEJA expanded the program by increasing funding from 16 mil to 66 million, and also increased our engagement activities with communities by expanding the role of our GEs to not only include ILSA-related campaigns, but also include general energy education and job training outreach. And can we go to the next one? So ILSA provides incentives throughout our 4 sub-programs, and I'll briefly go over them. So our residential solar small, which includes our 1 to 4 unit buildings, our residential solar large includes our larger buildings with 5 or more units, our nonprofit and public facilities, who can also serve as anchor tenants in our community solar programs, which are offered to households without the need to install panels on site. Across all our solar programs, we have no upfront costs for households, and we also include those guaranteed savings. Next slide. So we have 3 major players for ILSA that get everything going. These players are going to be our approved vendors, our Elevate, and IPA. So our approved vendors are the ones submitting projects and building them out. They must be registered prior to submitting project applications and meet all our program requirements. We have consumer protections in place for all of our vendors and enforcement mechanisms as well. So we really want to make sure that our customers do not come to harm while they're in this program, and that we have a process in place if we do encounter bad actors. Elevate is our program administrators, and they handle the day-to-day activities for ILSA. This includes approving vendors, reviewing project applications, and ensuring guidelines are followed by the AVs. And lastly, we have IPA, which oversees the work that Elevate is doing and plans long-term policies and goals for the program. Next slide. Okay, so to dive a little bit into our metrics for community solar, our community solar programs are located within the utility territories of Ameren and ComEd. So here you can see ILSA funding for PY5 and our project submissions. We have a total of 12 projects submitted, which also includes 1 withdrawal and 1 ineligible project. And then after review, we had 5 eligible projects and 5 that were approved. Our total incentives that have been approved are to the amount of 25.11 mil, and total capacity for projects approved is 8.7 megawatts. I also want to note for this slide that we have a total of about 1,400 subscribers for our community solar program. Next slide. And then we also wanted to give you a visual representation of our solar projects in Illinois. So here on the map, we have all of our ILSA community solar projects across the state. And the shaded areas are the project locations by zip code, and we also included the cities which they are located in. You can go to the next slide. Now hand this over to Jen.
Thanks, Adrienne. So we thought it was really important to make sure that, as Adrienne mentioned, that anybody that's participating in Illinois Solar for All as a participant is better off because of their participation. We have a number of layers of consumer protections in place, both before with disclosure forms and cost and savings requirements, during the process of getting involved with the program and subscribing. So and the site assessment and suitability requirements, that's more with the on-site solar sub-program. And then after projects are installed, there are warranties and ongoing maintenance requirements. And also with community solar, there's also financial guarantees that the customers won't have liens against their homes or have transfer fees for cancellation. There's some protections in there to make sure that once the customer is participating in Illinois Solar for All, that they're going to have a good experience and see measurable savings on their bills. And what we consider measurable savings is at least 50% of the value of the credits that the customer is getting from participation. So for community solar, that looks like if the customer is getting $10 in credits on their bills, they can't be charged more than $5. And that's just a really simple way of throwing numbers out there. It's, customers will see more than that regularly, but it's at least a 50% savings that the customers have to see on the value of the credits they're getting. We also have consumer protections in place for the approved vendors that are working with us. So there's a registration process to make sure that we are that we're vetting all of the vendors that are working with us and our customers. There's marketing guidelines that make sure that any promotions to potential vendors are truthful, transparent, and also respectful with regards to things like door-to-door marketing. And then afterwards, we also have requirements that the vendors use standard contracts and disclosure forms so documents that the customer is signing that lay out what their responsibilities and benefits are, so that the customer is able to make a well-informed decision on participation, and so that they know exactly what's going to be expected of them and the benefits that they should be seeing from participation in the program. Next slide. I will go over this one in depth. It's just talking more about our consumer protections and ensuring that there are safe and fair business practices associated with those that are working within Illinois Solar for All. We work with the Illinois Attorney General. We're talking with them regularly, and the Illinois Commerce Commission. And I think I'm skipping to my next slide, but we work with them on a number of ways that we can make sure that customers are getting a good experience, and that there is a way for them to get resolution if there are problems. Some challenges and successes that we've seen. So one issue that we didn't put on here is Illinois Solar for All opened in the summer of 2019 and was really kicking off in 2020 when the pandemic hit. So we've just had a lot of delays in projects actually being built. We are approving projects just fine, but there's been a delay in projects that are actually coming online and serving customers. So we've approved, I believe, 21 community solar projects so far, but to my understanding, only 9 of them are built and serving customers so far. We've had some delays and some issues with the utility billing, just some coordination issues between the utility and letting the approved vendors know about their credits. So that's been some challenges. And then we've also had some delays in implementation of a single billing system in Illinois. That was not, so single billing, when we say that, is the utility being able to charge the customer for their community solar subscription, rather than the community solar project billing the customer separately. We found that there's been some confusion with customers that have to deal with 2 bills. So we have tried to encourage our community solar projects to adopt the single billing option once it's available. That was enabled by CEJA back in 2021, and the utilities are still rolling it out. That's been delayed, unfortunately. So we are hoping that the utilities can roll that out in the springtime, coinciding with the rollout of the connector tool. One success that I am happy about is our partnership with the state LIHEAP office at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. They've been a wonderful wonderful partner in this process, and I'm really excited that we've been able to work with them through this connector tool as a foot in the door to try and get LIHEAP agencies to think about the opportunities that their customers have to save additional on their energy burdens through access to Illinois Solar for All. Next slide. And I'm sorry, we're flying through these because I know we have more slides than time, but I know you guys are getting copies of these slides, so we're always happy to answer questions. Just some collaborations that we've been able to form with Illinois Solar for All. Through this low-income clean energy connector, we're excited to work with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity and the LIHEAP agencies. As I mentioned earlier, we're collaborating with the Attorney General's office to make sure that any problematic approved vendors that are operating not just in Illinois Solar for All, but in our sister market rate program, Illinois Shines, we're making sure that the Attorney General's office is aware of any possibly bad behavior that we might see vendors doing. We work with the Illinois Commerce Commission, who is the regulatory body in Illinois over the utilities. And we also get approval from them for our program and how we implement it. And then we also created an Illinois Solar for All Advisory Committee. And so that's a committee that we created to engage different consumer advocates, low-income advocates, government agencies, the utilities, and approved vendors, all in a balanced way so that we can be trying to get feedback from the various stakeholders about how we can improve Illinois Solar for All. And we really thought it was important to make sure that we weren't just hearing from those that are most active in the solar market, so the approved vendors and the developers that are involved in the solar market, but we really wanted to make sure that we were getting to hear the voices of the residents that we're trying to serve and the agencies and organizations that represent those concerns and consumer advocates. Next slide. And I will pass it to Olivia.
Great, thank you so much, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Corliss, and I'm an ORISE Fellow working in the DC Department of Energy and Environment. And I'm joined by Thomas Bartholomew, who is the branch chief of the Renewable Energy and Clean Transportation branch here at DOEE. And we're going to talk about the DC Solar for All program. So here's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to begin by giving some background of the Solar for All program and some key partnerships that have been formed. And then Thomas is going to discuss some consumer protections as well as program successes and challenges. So the Solar for All program was established in 2016 as part of the Renewable Portfolio Standards Amendment Act, and it aims to bring the benefits of locally generated solar energy to 100,000 low to moderate income families in the district. And this is defined here as at or below 80% area median income. And so far, there are over 8,000 households that are currently benefiting from the program. DC DOEE partners with organizations to install both single family solar as well as community solar. And to date, there has been over 36 megawatts of capacity that have been installed as part of the program. But despite the type of participation, all Solar for All participants should expect to see 50% savings on their electricity bill for 15 years. The average annual savings right now is about $520 a year. And as far as how these projects get developed, DOEE partners with the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, who contracts with local solar developers to install the community renewable energy facilities, or CREFs, around the district that produce the solar energy that will be a part of the community solar subscriptions. And the program supports the development of these projects by providing a capacity-based incentive. Next slide, please. And these are a few of the partnerships that have formed over the course of the Solar for All program, that they help to not only increase the rate of solar installation, but also conduct community education and outreach about the program. And I'm going to pass it over to Thomas to talk more about these partnerships.
Thanks, Olivia. Yeah, so so these are just some of the partnerships. These are some of the key ones that we have. So partners like DC Public Library, Department of the DC Housing Authority, and the Department of General Services have all hosted solar systems, and in some cases also worked with us on distributing benefits to residents. Groundswell is a community organization that has managed so-called subscription management for the Solar for All program since that launched in 2020, which basically means Groundswell interfaces with the utility on behalf of all the customers to make sure that they're getting the appropriate community solar benefits on their accounts. And most of our household beneficiaries are community solar recipients, as the majority of district residents do not live in single family housing and therefore would struggle to get rooftop solar. And then the DC Sustainable Energy Utility is our implementing partner. So we have a contract with them, and they contract out with solar developers to install the solar systems, both single family and community, that we use to provide the benefits. And the Department of Employment Services is our training partner for our SolarWorks DC program, which is our workforce development arm that supports district residents becoming proficient in the skills needed to install solar and get good jobs as a result. So next slide, please. So these are just some of the consumer protections that we've included in the program. I did want to just sort of slightly change kind of what Olivia had said about the savings. You can actually get more than a 50% savings. The 50% is sort of the average that we are required by law to meet. But if you have particularly low electricity usage, you actually can get more than a 50% savings. You typically will cap that at just 100% of usage if people have particularly low savings. And we target a benefit minimum of $500, and it can be slightly higher than that. So folks can read this, but I think all of these have been important consumer protections for the program. Next slide, please. And then these are some of the successes that we've had overall, or successful endeavors to grow the program. So categorical eligibility is basically meaning that if you have one benefit program from the district, you're automatically eligible for Solar for All. You don't have to have further income verification from us. And we've tried to broaden that as much as we can, include as many programs as we can, and also include affordable housing covenant documents, which actually is it's one of the partnerships we've had with affordable housing providers, is to make it easy for their residents to get the benefits. We had a lot of success. We've had a lot of success signing people up through a direct mail campaign targeted at resident beneficiaries of various district government benefit programs. We also directly recruited at benefit centers where residents get benefits like SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, et cetera. We've developed a unified application for any district resident who wants to apply for LIHEAP benefits, the program obviously that HHS administers, along with the district administers a water utility benefit that's called CREAC. So you can apply for CREAC assistance, so water bill assistance, and heating and electricity benefit through LIHEAP, and then Solar for all in the same unified application. So you don't have to submit separate applications for each one, which has been helpful. And then we've had data sharing agreements with all different kinds of partners to, again, try to target residents. We partner with community organizations to do outreach, all that kind of stuff. And then I wanted Olivia to talk a little bit about the work we've done so far with the low income clean energy connector pilot, which has already been discussed a little bit so far, but I wanted her to talk about the DC specific work. So Olivia.
Yeah, so as Ariel mentioned, DC is a pilot state for the low income clean energy connector. And when it's operational, it will help enroll more LIHEAP eligible households into DC Solar for All. And as Thomas mentioned, the unified application will help a lot with that. So having the Solar for All terms and conditions listed on the LIHEAP application will make it easier to streamline this process and making sure as many district residents as possible are enrolled in both programs. And so the connector will help out with that a lot and maximize benefits for district residents.
Great. And I think we have one last slide. Yeah, so these are just some of the challenges that the program has faced since its inception. Obviously, the district is somewhat of a unique entity in this list of states that are presenting. We have more limited space than others. And so securing that limited available space is always a challenge. We've tried to be creative about that. The district, obviously, one thing that we do is we offer a pretty high solar incentive level. Renewable energy credits, the value of the renewable energy credits, the district is trying to maintain those at a pretty high level to incentivize roof space to be developed. We've also worked, as I mentioned, partnerships with various district government agencies. We've also began talking with the federal government about hosting on their space, and we've actually have one project that just opened this year that's on Park Service land, which is exciting. And so we're trying to be creative there. Another challenge has been there are a number of low-income district residents that are on so-called master meter buildings. It's a little bit harder to provide benefits to them because of that. So ensure that the residents are the beneficiaries as opposed to, say, the housing property itself. So usually what we have to do is create some kind of so-called indirect benefit scheme. So the utility bill credits that reduce people's electricity bills, that's a direct benefit or more direct benefit. The indirect benefit models that we've tried to create or have piloted, but have never been able to make entirely scalable yet. We will continue to try. Have included things like providing shuttle bus service for residents of the building, or increased security, meal vouchers, grocery vouchers, stuff like that. So trying to create a scalable scheme has been a challenge, but one we will continue to try to address. Because the Solar for All benefits are free, a lot of residents think that they're, quote, too good to be true. They have been scammed before and do not want to be scammed again. And so educating residents on that is important, and also going through channels that I think, sort of verify that we're legit has been important. So that's why we've tried to work out of other government office space, like do the benefit centers, work with other government agencies that are already giving folks benefits, or work with their affordable housing provider directly. So all this help to increase trust and address the too good to be true issue. We've also in the district had slow and costly solar interconnection processes, which we continue to try to intervene at the Public Service Commission to address. And then we've also filed a complaint on utility billing error issues. So some of our benefits are not being provided accurately or timely initially when the program first launched. And we've been trying to get the Public Service Commission to address that, and they have been so far. So just more work to come on that, but those are the challenges. And I will turn it over to our friends from Minnesota. So Michael.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Schmitz. I am the director of the Energy Assistance Program for the Minnesota Department of Commerce. We are the LIHEAP program for the state of Minnesota. I think one thing that I'm just going to point out, to start out with, is that maybe in contrast to some of the other initiatives that have been discussed, our effort here is not so much about helping households get connected with community solar, but just ensuring that those LIHEAP recipients who do have a community solar garden subscription are not harmed in the participation with those programs and then in LIHEAP. So To that end, I'm going to hand it off to John Brown, who, among many other things for our program, is responsible for managing energy vendor relationships. John?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, and as Michael mentioned, I am the energy vendor manager for the Energy Assistance Program in Minnesota, which of course it involves all sorts of utilities, delivered fuels, and now also the solar gardens that we've been able to work with. So if we can go to the next slide, we can kind of go through it. So first thing I just want to mention is we've had a program now, since 2022 program year. So we're starting now at the third year of it, but it goes back. Michael can attest to this. We had conversations back in, I think, probably 17, 18 with different parties, talking about how solar could work with energy assistance. And so really what kind of kicked it off is, a low income focused garden approached us and said, we're getting a lot of questions from our customers. They're being encouraged to apply for energy assistance, or maybe they're already on it. And so they're saying, no, they don't want to participate in a solar garden because they're worried about, eligibility or how their benefit might be, diminished or, affected by it. So, a lot of the back and forth initially was just simply, education, right? Letting them know that, participating in a solar garden wouldn't, prevent them from participating in energy assistance. So with that, we also just continued to work with them to make sure how we set up the program wouldn't harm people who did participate in a solar garden and received a discount or a credit back on their utility bill. And so that was really the key sort of origin of how we ended up coming up with a program that involved them. And as what Michael said, it hasn't been really about reaching out to make sure people are participating. It's more for those that are choosing to do it on their own. We didn't want our program to be a hindrance or a detriment to that. So if you can go to the next slide, I just kind of want to set the table to help people understand how it works in Minnesota. Obviously not every LIHEAP program is the same. And so I think it's beneficial to have the background on sort of how our benefits are determined and what benefits, they can get. So we base our benefits for our households off of their income and their prior year's energy costs if available, and those costs are supplied to us from all the participating energy vendors. So they give us 12 months of consumption over the last year. We give them like a 16-month window, and from that we determine their benefit. And so that primary grant that we give them is based on those costs. And of course, if someone's participating in solar and seeing a lower electric cost and we don't have that piece of the puzzle, they could be harmed. So that's sort of where this comes into play. If for some reason we don't have data, we have a backup system, backup matrix, benefit matrix, we call it. And again, that could be a situation where, maybe it's a fuel change that's happened and there's no history there, or maybe the house wasn't lived in but prior to that, or maybe it's even a new construction. So we do have that in cases where actual data isn't available, and then we build that from the data we get from the other utilities. So it's a pretty real match to what other people would be getting. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect because it's an aggregated average, but the goal there is to try to match up a person with their housing type, their fuel type, and sort of what the average cost is there. And one thing I do want to just point out is solar gardens in our system, our plan, are not eligible for crisis benefits. Basically, they can direct their primary grant to it, but because losing access to a solar garden wouldn't result in a disconnection of electric service, we don't consider that a crisis eligible payment. So it would only be for their base grant, which, if you can go to the next slide, kind of talk about how their benefits are determined. But this is another key piece, is how the benefits ultimately make their way to the different energy vendors for the program. And so in Minnesota, the households actually dictate, they choose where their benefits go. We have a default 70%, 30%, that goes, 70% goes to whoever their primary heating source is. So, if that's natural gas or propane or whatever, and then 30% goes to electric. And again, that's default. If the household doesn't take any action, doesn't say anything differently, that's just how our payments will generate. However, on the application, they can specify if they want it paid out differently. So, they may have a reason for wanting it all to go to one or the other. Maybe they're more behind with one or the other and they want the benefit to cover that. So they can indicate all to their main heating, all to electric, or an other. And in the other case, they could list they want it to go to their solar garden, or they want 10% to go to their solar garden. Whatever the household chooses, we allow them to do that. So it's really up to the household. Just because a solar garden participates, just because they listed a solar garden on their application, doesn't mean that we will necessarily send a benefit there. Again, it's up to the household if they want some of their benefit to go to that. And so it's important to know is subscription costs would be factored in. We take that into the equation in determining their energy burden and ultimately their benefit. But just because it's factored in doesn't mean that that garden will actually receive a benefit payment. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about how the benefits are paid out. So benefits are paid out when an app is approved. Again, it's not a crisis eligible program, so it's only that primary grant. We do pay it in a lump sum. So if they say, I want 100% of my benefit to go to my solar garden, it's, whatever they get, it's $1,000, whatever their grant would be. They can elect to have it spread out over several months, although that's not by default. They would have to indicate that to their service provider in that case. And then on sort of the grand scheme of things, when we make payments in general, whether it's to a solar garden or anybody, it's in bulk. So it could include potentially more than one household's payments on there, which is why we give our solar gardens participants and all of our energy vendors access to a version of our site so they can look up payment information when they do receive payment. Next slide, please. All right, so how do solar gardens become vendors for Minnesota? So in most every way, they're actually treated the same as any other vendor for our program, and other energy vendor. The main difference is when we're asking them for consumption costs when determining the benefit, we're actually asking them for subscription costs. We've had some confusion around that. They've listed, like how many kilowatts they produced and then how much credit that was, but we want to know actually what the household is paying to participate in that program. And again, that's all pulled in a way to give us the full picture, right, of a household's burden, so that when we generate their benefit, it isn't, harming them to get that credit on their electric, but not factoring what they're paying to participate in the garden. Households will list the solar garden on their application. We have a spot right on our application that asks for their electric, their heating source, and then now, we have solar garden. If we get one in and they're not currently a vendor in the program, we'll reach out to them and ask them to sign up, talk about the program, what it means to be involved. We don't exactly, I know some other programs that have talked before us mentioned, vetting and making sure, there's a certain benefit achieved. We don't do that. Again, this is more up to the household. If they're choosing to participate, what we do basically in our registration process is make sure that the state of Minnesota is, set up to pay them. And there are some checks and balances that go into that to making sure that they're a vendor that is sort of on the up and up with the state as far as receiving payment. But other than that, we don't, ensure a certain benefit return or anything like that. And then right now, we currently have 2 solar gardens signed up. Those actually started, they were the first 2 right away in program year 22. We have had 3 different ones come in on household applications since then. I have reached out to those ones on numerous occasions, and as of yet, they are unwilling to sign up or haven't responded, and so we're still at just 2, although we know that there are other ones out there being used by our clients in Minnesota. So we continue to try to work on adding more, but right now it is just the 2 that we've been working with since program year 22. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to sort of preemptively answer a couple of questions that we typically get when we talk about this. And so the first is, well, what if a solar garden doesn't participate? Like I just mentioned, we've had people list them on their application, and those gardens are not signing up. They're not working with us. They're not providing those subscription costs. So how do we work around that? So the first thing we do is we would make the electric costs that are provided from the utility. In most cases, it's Xcel Energy in Minnesota that's working with the solar gardens, but we call invalidate that consumption. And essentially what that will do is it causes us to use that backup matrix that I talked about before. And the key there is we don't want consumption from their electric provider that is diminished, right? That has been reduced due to the credits received. We want to try to look at that whole picture. And so in the cases where we don't get subscription costs from the solar garden, we do this sort of backup so that the household isn't necessarily harmed. Now, again, it's an average. They might still come out behind. They might come out ahead in their benefit in that case. It's not perfect, but that's sort of what we do to prevent losing out on the benefit. And then on the next slide, we talk about what happens if a household ends their subscription after they applied. So they signed up, they were doing it at the time, they put it on their application, but now we find out they're not a participant. So if and it might be from the household, it might be from the solar garden that lets us know basically any future payments, if they were scheduled, would be stopped to that garden. If there were any credits left on that account, we'd ask those to be refunded. And then in the future, when their application, if they were to apply next year, we would not seek subscription costs for that household as part of their benefit. So we can still work with it if they quit during the year. We don't have to necessarily keep paying in those situations. And then the next slide, if you can go to that, talks about, well, what happens if they join after? So the way we treat our applications for LIHEAP is it's a snapshot in time. And so if they were not participating at that time and that we determined the benefit, that's not something that we would go back and retroactively add those costs to it. I know in the first year we kind of did some of that as we were getting information out about how people didn't know to apply or put it on there, but our standard practice is not to redetermine the benefit. We would add the garden to their application in our system. And that way, if there was any remaining benefit that the household wanted, it could be directed to the solar garden. So, maybe they had just been determined eligible from when they applied, now they're just getting their benefit determined. They could, call in and say, I want all that to go there. I want 50% or something like that. So we do have ways to work with it if, the status changes throughout the program year. And I think that's it. So, yeah, that wraps up what we have for Minnesota.
Well, thank you all so much. And I know we are coming close to the end of the webinar time today, but I do want to address a couple of the questions in the chat if we have an opportunity to do so. I know the states have been on it and responding to those questions digitally, so thank you. Take a look at those responses. I did want to add to the first question regarding, where does the LIHEAP funding flow and what do LIHEAP administrators need to do to make a change in the function to allow for these type of uses of LIHEAP funds. So LIHEAP does flow through grant administrators, grant recipients. Normally they're varying state offices. Sometimes they administer other programs like the Community Services Block Grant Program or Weatherization Assistance Program. They are all listed on our website, including contact information where you can connect with them. So what a LIHEAP administrator would need to do to consider adding in some of these allowable uses, and I'll have some of the states speak up on their planning processes if they want to share more, but they would need to modify their submitted model plan to include some of those costs. And really, I think the key is to have a discussion with our state administrators to understand how LIHEAP funds can be utilized and what makes the most sense to stretch the dollars the most with that goal of reducing a household's energy burden. So I hope that helped further answer your question a little bit. And then Ariel, and I know you're typing on there, but there is one question regarding the Clean Energy Connector tool. And is it required that states and utilities are using consolidated billing already, or will it be available and functional in states even without that system?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Consolidated billing is not a requirement of using the connector, but it is something that we've seen that makes it a lot, easier in a lot of cases for folks to be able to enroll in community solar and, have access to different kinds of bill payment models. We'll be working with states individually to decide which projects they would like to see on the connector. So potentially this could be a requirement in some states based on state preference, but isn't a requirement from the Department of Energy.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that covers all of the questions that we had in the Q&A box feature. So thank you all for doing that. And as we close out today, I just want to share again that we'll be sending out these slides for folks to be able to take a look at. And included in the slides are a link to multiple resources that may be available, and including is a spotlight video from our counterparts here in OCS for the Community Services Block Grant Program, which is just another way to really show how renewable energy projects can be utilized for low-income households and the impact that that can have on communities. There's also links on that resource slide to our other partner organizations where you can find additional resources on programs dedicated to serving low-income households. Lastly, before we end today, I just want to take a moment and thank all of our panelists for sharing their experiences and expertise in this field. We recognize completely that projects like this require collaboration across many funding streams, and we truly appreciate your partnership and your participation today. So thank you all for joining us today and have a wonderful afternoon.